So I've known Ric for 28 years. We were in business school together, and so we didn't grow up together, but we've kind of we're entering. We spent the last 28 years entering early middle age together, if I can put it like that. And I've shared already with the class the broad outline of Ric's career and Ric's life. So I'm going to focus on Ric as a leader and focus on Ric as a friend. Starting with the latter. You know, I have 4 brothers, 2 sisters. I'm the eldest, so I'm the older brother to each of them. So Ric is my older brother. Okay, despite the fact he's 3 years younger than me, Ric's my older brother in every respect, and you'll understand why after this. And one thing I would say to all of you, it's important as you get older to have a Ric in your life. Somebody who is a listener, is a skeptic, asks the right questions at the right times, is a provocateur, is a truth teller. And this is not as important, but I got this with Ric. He's a total ball buster. I consider myself very persuasive. I can persuade just about anybody of anything. But my litmus test on my power of believing in something is, you know, can I share this with Ric without kind of looking down at my toes? Because his bullshit antenna are extremely well attuned. And the role Ric plays for me, he plays for many people. Some of them I know about, some of them I don't know about. But he invests in people. He invests in friends. He reminds me a lot of something my father has said and something I've shared with this class. If you want something done, ask someone who is busy. Only ask somebody who is busy, and that's very much Ric. And frankly, Ric has always been like this. But 2009 and being on flight United 1549, that was a game changer. And I think in the immediate aftermath of that, and for the last 11 years, Ric has thought an awful lot about the value of time, the importance of truth, the importance of what matters and what doesn't matter, who matters and who doesn't matter. And I think anyone who's seen his TED Talk around 3 things I learned understands completely what I'm talking about. Then when I think about him as a leader, and again, I'm not going to talk about Red Ventures, the success of Red Ventures, and what Ric has done in business. When I think of him, when I think of my friend Ric, I think of, first of all, he's an immigrant from a small island, and very proud of that. And I think of how over time he has pulled together the different parts of his own life experience to make a powerful impact. You know, when I think about the causes that Ric is directly involved with, these are causes that he has started himself. Golden Doors, rebuild Puerto Rico, which he did after the Hurricane Maria, Life Sports, and Road to Hire. These are very thoughtful, deliberative harnessing together of different parts of Ric's life. Puerto Rico, immigration, sports, technology, Charlotte. All of these are pulled together in a thoughtful way to place to his strengths and makes the world a better place. And then finally, I would say, you know, for this class, yeah, if I was describing Ric, what are the other pieces that would stand out for me? Extraordinary curiosity, voracious reader, and as recently as last night, sending around book recommendations to his colleagues. Perpetual student. Whenever I meet Ric in New York, he has a notebook and a pen, and he's invariably coming from or going to a meeting with a corporate leader or a leader of some kind or other, and he'll go in with 3 or 4 questions. And very, very, very rarely, but occasionally in his conversations with me, he'll take out his notebook and actually write something down. So very occasionally I'll say something that'll give him pause. Um, the other thing I would say about him, just so that you don't get a sense, I'm talking about Vincent de Paul or Francis of Assisi here. This is the most relentless competitor I've ever met in every aspect of his life. This is a born competitor and an extraordinary competitor. And so that's Rick. And with that, I'm going to go back a little bit, Rick, to what I was talking about earlier in terms of the causes that you've been very focused on over the last few years. Golden Doors focused on undocumented immigrants. Rebuild Puerto Rico focused on the horrific experience of people on the island after Hurricane Maria. And Live Sports and Road to Hire, basically getting people up a leg up and getting started with their lives and their careers and looking to change realities. You run a very big company in the southern part of the United States, and it's very, very much a multicultural company in terms of the employment base, and you care deeply about this. Maybe just start by just talking a little about your experience over the last 4 to 6 weeks in response to, pretty much precipitated what happened in the South, but then what crystallized in Minneapolis, whatever it was, 6 weeks ago, and what the experience has been like for you as a leader in the intervening period, and where your head is on this.
Well, first of all, I think about half of what Adrian said is true. You got to figure out which half is that. I am privileged to call him one of my dearest friends. Adrian, as you all know, is loyal, is kind, is smart, is witty. It is also a very, very honest friend. And my time with him is precious. So when he asked me, would I do this, I didn't hesitate. Hey, AJ, can you mute your thing?
Yeah. I'm talking to Tina here, so I will.
Say hi. But as you can tell, he's aged a lot better than I have, so that's not a fair statement. But so Adrian asked me about what is it like to lead in an environment like this. And we have a company meeting, we call it Culture Fest every November. And for whatever reason this year, I close Culture Fest. There's 3,000 people, UK, Brazil, all over the US. And there was a quote that I said, we have lived in the most peaceful of times. And we have led as an organization, as a team, in really benign times, other than probably 2008 and 9, but that didn't really hurt us because we were not in the financial services industry. And the true test is going to come when things change. And little did I know we were going to go through a financial crisis, a health crisis, and a race crisis all at the same time. And it reminds me of a saying, which is, a leader is only a leader in a time of crisis. Otherwise, you're just in charge. And you don't get the chance to call yourself a leader. Only others can call you a leader. So you have to earn the title. So just because you're in charge, you're not a leader, and you're only a leader in a time of crisis. And I've always thought that, and it sounded like great, inspiring theory. And then when this hit, it was mid-March, I looked in the mirror and I said, well, it is showtime. You've been talking about this for a long time. And, maybe part of me wondered what would be my reaction when this happened. And I've tried my very best to be at the, kind of in my front foot here, be learning, be evaluating what's going on, over communicating to the company. Adrian referred to an email. I'm Puerto Rican. Spanish is my first language. English is hard for me. And I wrote a letter to the company mid-March, and then I wrote it the next Sunday, and now it's 10 letters later or so that I've written on Sunday. So I spent a bulk of my weekend writing a letter because I think people want to understand what's going on, right? So we quickly realized that our business is down about 22%, so meaningfully, but that we did not need to have any structural changes. So we announced very quickly that we would not have any layoffs, and even employees who can work will continue to pay them. And to me, that was really important because a company should stand for a lot more than making profit. And it is in times like this that you get to prove that to people. Now, we're a performance culture, and people have to kind of bring their very best. And, you know, we're not a family, we're a team. And in a team, you got to bring your very best. But in times of crisis, you become a family. So we've rallied around it. And once you, once people realize that we were in it together, it's really galvanized us. The second thing we did in this time period, and then I'll get to Adrian's question on the last 6 weeks, was to really take a hard look of our business. And what we realized is it is so seldom, it's never happened in my life. And, you know, in some ways, I hope it doesn't happen again in yours, but it's so seldom that the world really pauses, that it literally pauses, and that you can take a look at things in with such a different perspective. So given that the world paused, we started looking. We have about 25 different businesses. Some of you may recognize, we own USwitch in the UK as an asset, for example. But so we've looked at all these businesses and said, okay, we have 6 quarters that really is not going to matter. What are we going to do to completely reinvent these businesses? So we moved about a quarter of our employees from business to business, the ones that needed to grow versus the ones that couldn't grow. Where we have businesses in travel. We own the Points Guy. It's an asset some of you may know. No one is traveling. That business has gone from 120 employees making $5 million a month to losing $1 million a month, right? We own businesses like creditcards.com, which is a big, big business. No one is lending right now. So it's not like we have had no hardships, but for us, it was a matter of reprioritizing and then reimagining our future. So we have launched a bunch of different priorities using the same people. And then the third, then we thought we were kind of coming out of it, and then the racial crisis hits. And, you know, I don't see myself as white. My grandfather's Lebanese. I probably have a little bit of everything in me, being Puerto Rican. And in Puerto Rico, race is not the same issue as it is in the US. I think Europe is also somewhat different, but in Puerto Rico, it's more where were you born versus what's the color of your skin. And I've never thought of race as something that I need to worry about. And what I realized when the crisis hits, and I started calling a lot of my Black friends and saying, hey, hold on, what's it like? What's your life been like? What do you think about your kids? What do you think about? I tell you, I was so embarrassed that I knew so little. I was so embarrassed that I was blind to something that I was condoning. And I wrote a letter. That Sunday letter to our company was a letter that the theme of it is, you know, the opposite of love is not just hate, but the opposite of love is indifference. And I had turned an indifferent eye to something that really mattered. And while my universe and my influence is really tiny, I was no longer going to allow for our team to turn a blind eye and to be indifferent. So as a result, we've gone in a whole sprint of effort and have set up a team to lead us through this. But the real question will come in 5 years, 10 years from now. Did it really last? Because what I've seen, and even saw it on the plane flight, which is people are very purposeful the first 30 days, some the next 6 months, few after a couple years. I see a lot of people that were in the same flight that I was, which was the ultimate gift. You got a chance to say goodbye to your life. You had 90 seconds to die, no suffering. You said goodbye and you got another chance. And I meet some of these people and it's like, it never happened. It's just something about the human nature. So the question for me is, as an organization, are we going to make sure we don't waste this crisis? And are we going to, as a result, be a better company? Are going to be a better kind of part of our community? And there's a lot of efforts right now. We need to decide, are we going to boycott Facebook or not? You know, and this is one of those really difficult issues where it's almost right versus right. You know, we believe that no one should be discriminated against. We don't condone hate. We don't condone a lot of things, just like Facebook doesn't, if you really dig in. They've taken a very, very libertarian view on this, but I also believe in free speech. And where does that line have? And you get all these big companies that are coming out and saying, okay, we're going to boycott Facebook, and we have 500 African Americans employees saying, are we going to boycott Facebook? And to us, it really doesn't matter financially very much, but it matters as a matter of principle. What is it that we stand for? So you realize in times like this is you're dealing with issues that you never dealt with before. So it's not just a racial issue and how do you change a culture? How do you educate all your employees on what is it to really be Black in this country? Or how do you increase representation? Or how do you invest in your communities even more than we've done? But it touches now everything. It is a lens by which we all should be measured by. So long answer to your question, Adrian, but I believe that these are the times that we will look back and say, who showed up? The best version of me showed up. And that's all you can do in life. We're making plenty of mistakes. There are things that I wish I could back 2 weeks, 4 weeks and change, but you know what? There's no value to that. I'll do it better 2 weeks from now.
Brian, are you picking it up from here? Or
yeah, sure. No, I can pick it up, Adrian. I just wanted, in case there was any follow-up you wanted, but no, Rick, if it's okay, I'll kind of continue on that thread if that's all right. Because I think you'd outlined there like I said, I'd circulate. Adrian had shared with me the opposite of love article or your letter, and it struck me the idea of like kind of maintaining purpose, and there was a line you used in it which I found very powerful, which was the openness and willingness to better understand how we can relate to each other and improve the world around us. If you're not willing to do that, it's basically in direct conflict with our most basic expectations from employees. And anyway, it's very interesting, and it certainly kind of prompted some response even within WIP to think about how we were responding to it as well. You referenced there your kind of corporate, your corporate event, and it reminded me of, I was listening to the podcast you did with Peter Attia back in November, and you kind of talked about that a leader is a leader only in a time of crisis, or you're just in charge. And I just wonder, when you think about the leadership skills, whether it be addressing cultural issues within the organization or reprioritization, or like all of the various challenges that we faced in the last 6 weeks and 3 months, like, are there new skills as a leader that you've been finding that you've had to develop? Are there skills that you've pushed before? Like, is there a reflex that you've already had that you're using? So as these emerging leaders and established leaders that we have on the line are thinking about their own skills, are there new things that you think you've found, pushed, or developed, or things that have been useful for you? So what are the new leadership skills you've been developing?
First of all, when I think about leadership, I think of humility is the first word that comes, and humility comes in many different ways, right? And humility comes in being approachable, in being authentic, in communicating openly and freely, in admitting your mistakes, in being vulnerable when you don't know. I think that's true humility, not fake humility. And it comes over periods of time, because what you want as a leader is the trust of the organization to know that you're trying to do the best you can. Not that you're perfect, not that you will get it right, but trust is at the core of what you need as a leader. So what behaviors do you need to exhibit to get the trust from the organization? One of the things I've learned, Brian, that is unique at this time period, how important communicating is. And not only are we doing this Sunday letter, but we're doing an all-employee meeting every 2 weeks of 3,000 people. They want to know what's going on with the virus, what's going on with race, what's going on with our business, what's going on with, there's no amount of information that is enough, is what I'm finding out. We have a leadership team of 34 people, our senior leaders. We went one layer lower, which is 140 people, and we've gone from having that meeting every 4 weeks to every week. And so the frequency, and we just finished it this morning, is an hour, and we're doing all sorts of creative, fun things to make them, somewhat enjoyable. But it is important to really communicate, because out of the communication, you at least take away what people what they don't want to ask you. And when you communicate a lot, you start building trust. And then trust is what you really need to lead in a time like this. Other things, Adrian touched on a couple of it. You can't ask anybody to do something you're not willing to do. And to me, to be a leader in an environment like this, in a super competitive, we compete against companies that are formidable, is you got to be willing to work hard. If I can give you one advice at your age, the next decade for you is your apprenticeship decade. Many of you think that you're going to finish college and your education and you're finished, or the first couple of years is your entry-level job. Treat your next decade as your apprenticeship decade. And think about it, not put yourself in a mindset of investing, not harvesting. And eventually, if you are really purposeful in that investment stage, and if you gain lots of experiences, if you learn a lot about what you're good at and not good at, about the things that you enjoy doing or not, about the environments where you thrive or don't thrive, it is in that journey of the next decade that you really will set yourself up for your more purposeful one. Don't be in a hurry to have an impact. Be in a hurry to learn as much as you can, to learn skills, to work with different people, to learn about yourself, to put yourself in really uncomfortable situations. And Brian, for me, I have a lot of young people, I have about 18 nephews and nieces, and they always ask, what should I look for when I go work somewhere? And it comes down to three things in my mind. You should look for a place where it's kind of part of the future. Try to go work in an industry or in an environment where it's not, something that is going to be gone in a decade or two. So think about what is going to be relevant in the future from now. Go to a place where it's growing, because if it's growing, you're going to get a chance to do things that you're not prepared to do or that you shouldn't be doing. And learning on someone else's nickel is one of the greatest experiences you can get in your apprenticeship year. So if you go to a great company that is flat or not growing, then you're waiting your turn. There's so many good people there and you're going to wait. So I will look for growth, all else being equal. And the third is find a place where you can be you, where you can bring all of you to work, where you feel free to be you, where you don't feel like you have to be 80% of you or not you. Because it's only in that environment that you're going to be able to really thrive and to grow. And then there's no such thing, by the way, and again, I have radical views on some of this, so I apologize. And I realize that this are maybe more American than not, but, work-life balance, not at your age. Like, your work-life balance you're going to need when you have kids, when you have a spouse, when you have aging parents, when you have real stuff. At your age, work-life balance is work and rest, right? And, and I believe in work-life harmony. Like, I love to work out. I love my friends. I love to laugh. I love things, but I don't waste any time. If there's a skill that you must master, is waste no time. Look at everything you do, and every week or every month, look back and say, what should I do less of? What should I try to do without? What should I try to do less often? And I know I'm rambling here, Brian, but if you allow me, I have one more thought on that. And this is, I learned from somebody that in life, you should try everything you do in life. You should think about doing it as at least as a twofer, if not a threefer. And what that means is don't go play golf because you love golf. That's a one-fer. A twofer is go play golf with your best friend. That's a twofer. Go play with your best friend at a really beautiful course. That's a threefer. So if you think of your time as something that you can combine. So when I'm with my friends, I'm getting nurtured by my friends. I'm learning from my friends. So I select friends that I find inspiring, motivating, and we always go do something interesting and we exercise. So think of your life as how many things you can compound into the same hour. Because by the way, that's your only currency. There is no other currency but time. And unfortunately, most people think it's money, and it takes them too long to realize that, money creates as many problems as it solves them. So if you become a master of your time, the world is your oyster.
Yeah. Rick, and I was conscious, I heard a line you said as well about how kind of it's important to say no to things. Kind of saying no gives you the opportunity to say yes to something else. So I appreciate you using some of your time to say yes to us on this. I'm going to just say, I have a series of questions, but I do want to bring in some student voices. And I think Laura Bartley, who might introduce herself, has a particularly relevant question. I think that leads into some of those, like, how do you learn in moments of leadership? So Laura, could I call on you to ask your question?
Yeah, sure, Brian. Hi, Rick. It's great to have you here today. I've been listening to your podcast and sort of gaining loads of insights throughout the past few days. So I'm really excited to be able to actually ask you a question. My name is Laura. I have my undergrad in international relations, and I'm just finishing a 2-year master's in intelligence, security, and strategy. So I'm coming to the end, about to enter the real world in the best time possible. But I thought it was really interesting when you're talking about this sort of time of crisis. And I was curious how we can relate that back to your own experience of crisis, specifically with the plane landing, and how sort of struggle or traumatic events can be drivers for positive and transformative change. And I was kind of really interested, do you think that you would have had this big moment of clarity that you talk about, big perspective change later down the road if this event hadn't happened, or was this sort of a big turning point in your life? And do you think this sort of trauma and struggle is a necessary part of that sort of self-actualization? And then can we sort of draw any parallels with the existential uncertainty that we see with COVID-19 at the moment? And sort of, are there specific ways that we can harness the fear that is present within society? I know you kind of mentioned it already, but I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on all those kind of aspects.
Thank you, Laura. I just realized you have about 50 points of IQ on me, so this is an unfair conversation, but that said, I'll try to, where my mind went, Laura, is I was actually born out of a crisis. I was born premature. I was born, and I was huge. I am 6'5", and for Puerto Rico, that is really huge. My father, who was a doctor, he jokes that where they will send the premature babies on the incubator things, they were just tiny things, and like my arms and legs came out of it, but my lungs were underdeveloped, and I almost died. My dad slept next to me, and that's why we're super close for nights and nights and nights. And what I realized is that it was an amazing gift to be born in a crisis, to have to learn how to fight the day I was born. I was not given a choice but to learn how to fight and survive. And I never realized that until much later in life, to be fair. But I have now come to the realization that most of life's true gifts come disguised as real difficult challenges or perceived as bad luck. I don't speak out in public much. I speak to our company and in a few places, just more out of the time. But I do speak to middle schoolers, especially in the inner city, and I do a talk around the power of luck. And the gist of the talk is that, luck is neither good or bad. It really depends what you do with it. I was severely pigeon-toed until I was 12, and it was really tough. I love basketball. Basketball didn't love me back. I came to the U.S. I did not know any English. My brother wrote my application, and I was an accounting major because I didn't know English, and that ended up being really good luck. Like every time in my life that I face whatever hardships I face, and I face a lot more. My wife and I lost 5 pregnancies. Most marriages would have given up. We ended up adopting 2 incredible kids. Our business launched in January 2000. By April, the business was done. By November, we had 100,000 left out of $2 million and no revenue. Right? And all of those things I look back on and I am supremely grateful for, because out of those things come the opportunity to find new opportunities. So luck is not good or bad. There's all sorts of great stories around, there's a story of depends, and it really depends on what you do with it. So that's my approach when anything like this happens, when the flight happened. So I'm gonna try to answer at least a few of your questions. When the flight happens, my mindset went to that because that was my philosophy. You know, many people haven't flown since that day. Many people said, that's it, I'm never getting on a flight again. I flew that night. I came home that night because I knew that if I didn't get back on the horse, I was never going to ride a horse again. And I joked that if that plane went down again, then it was me God was coming to see, and better get it out or get it done with, right? 2 planes in one day. So I flew that night, but I wanted to get on with my life because I realized I've been given a gift. And I've been given a gift at that point to have this trauma that truly changed my life. Now, would it have been the same? I don't think so. I don't think it would have been the same. Would I've come to some realizations? Often happens later in life. I have an eclectic group of friends. One of my dearest friends is 97 years old. I have friends in their 80s, in their 70s, in their 60s. And I love older friends because, especially if they have of equal minds, you can learn a lot about the trade-offs and the decisions they make. You know, life, it's like a Shakespeare play. We're all actors and actresses of the same script. You want to find out what decisions to make, go find other people that you respect and what decisions they made. And so I've always lived by this notion that there's always good in anything that happens. And that was an incredible gift for me, Laura. The fact that I was able to say goodbye to my life. I had 100% certainty that I was dead. I was at 95%. I was hoping it will blow up because that would have been a more, peaceful way of dying than if it, broke into pieces and then to come back and live again. And now, is it perfect? No. Do I forget at times? Yeah. Do I fight with my wife a ton less? Yes. Do I ask for forgiveness all the time? Yeah. I don't want to win fights anymore. Like I don't, right? But we're all human. So it's my life is a lot less wasteful of energy than it used to be. Therefore, I get a lot more out of my time as a result. So I am very grateful it happened. I highly recommend it, but you got to get the guarantee landing. So don't get it without the guarantee landing. And it was, and to me, it's what you make out of the difficult time. So when you think about this time, and I have learned so much about myself in this time. I learned things that I want to keep in my life. I learned more than anything, all the things that I miss and I appreciate. And no matter what, no matter how present you are, we just take things for granted. And my hope is for many people is that when you come out of this, not for 6 months and not for 2 years, but for the rest of your life, remember what it was like when you couldn't hug your mom, when you couldn't hug your grandma, when you couldn't, freely go and share a coffee with a friend, when you couldn't freely do things in the park, when you couldn't freely, do whatever it is that you love to do. And remind yourself, write a note and says, you know what, this is a gift. Because the more appreciation you have in life, the more gratitude you have in life, the more fulfilled you're going to feel.
Great. Thanks, Rick. And Laura, thanks for that question. I think, Rick, it's kind of leads nicely back into that maintaining purpose theme that you started. Like, how do you sustain, so if you do have those moments of crisis, how do you learn from them, but then also how do you keep going on the race and make sure you don't forget it. If it's okay, I'm going to shift to a slightly more specific kind of leadership question. Like I said, I am going to move on to the 4787 question that in a moment or two. But Ronan had a question that I thought maybe like linking into this kind of managing yourself and managing teams. I think Ronan's question is relevant and maybe leads in here. So Ronan, would you mind? I know you've introduced yourself already, but if you wouldn't mind asking your question.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. And thanks again, Rick. I just want to ask you, Rick, Adrian has talked about you being a competitive guy, and that much is definitely clear. But I just want to ask you a kind of a political-oriented question about leadership within a team as opposed to competitiveness against a rival. So I want to ask you if you have any advice on dealing with internal conflict and infighting in a team that has shared common goals. So I'm thinking of political examples that kind of like the examples that plague the Democratic Party year in, year out of, a hard left wing versus a more moderate wing, or Black Lives Matter more recently, whether defunding the police is too extreme a concept, or even here in Ireland with our own new three-party coalition government. Do you have any advice or do you have any approach to keeping a team united when common goals are the same, but there's when there's factional kind of disputes. And if I can, I do have a second just silly sentimental question of general curiosity, because you are a unique guy. The crew and passengers of 1549, do you guys still meet up or have any interaction anymore? That's not exactly a business related question, but I'd be curious to hear. Thanks, Rick.
So the latter question, which is simple, there's reunions and so forth. At the beginning, I did not participate, but I did go to some of the latter reunions, and it was wonderful. And I still, in my heart, want to find something in my way to do for the captain at the right time. I thought I had an idea, but it kind of fell through, but something else will come. So, you know, I think that relationships really matter. And, you know, there's a saying that to have good friends, you have to be a good friend. To have a good partner, you have to be a good partner. It doesn't go the other way around. To have a really good spouse, you have to be a good spouse. It's just so when you talk about people that may have different ideological views on things, relationship is the only way that you can bridge some of them. And the way to reach whatever level of common areas, or, you know, compromise, or, you know, understanding, you know, the key to any negotiation is understanding what's important to the other side, not what is important to you. And if you're really good at probing and asking questions, and it's never the question they ask you, it's always the question behind the question. So all of this is kind of it's like a chess game, like psychological chess game. But if you can really understand what someone else values, and you can figure out a way to help them get what they want while you get what you need, those are where real truces and good compromises come. Now, sometimes they're so far apart and there's no trust, and there's no relationship, and there's no basis, that it becomes then, I don't know, an ego engagement or something like that. But Ronan, you brought up a topic that I think about a lot, the way you tee this up, and the competitiveness. And this is something I've learned and observed and studied a little bit, is what drives our competition, and what is at the core of our competition. I try to explore this with a lot of supreme athletes in conversations, or other people that I think are very good at whatever they do. And it comes down to, most people probably fall into one of three buckets. You know, the people that are super competitive because they want to beat you up and kill you, and you can't, you know, it's not worth it unless they see you on the ground, and it's a little bit of that animal instinct. And there's boxers, or Michael Jordan, or all these people that you can see. And there's plenty of people in business that you know, the only way for them to win is for them to really make sure no one else wins. And you got to understand what drives somebody. There's most people, especially most people your age, and I actually think it's not a bad thing. It's one that you need to be. We're driven by failure. You know, we all feel like, well, am I that good? And am I as good as people think I am? And why, you know, we all have a bit of imposter syndromes and all these different things. And that fear of failure drives you. It pushes you. It puts you in uncomfortable situations. You only grow when you're uncomfortable, right? So you only grow when you feel that heart rate going. Otherwise, you're just going through the paces. So, you know, those people, that fear of failure, those who can understand that when you feel your adrenaline rushing, you have to run towards that fear, not away from it, are the people that, you know, really end up doing well in life. But fear of failure, what I've noticed in friends that are Adrian's and my age, is that it gets exhausting. It gets exhausting because the more you do, the higher the fall. The more you do, the more you can lose. And you see a lot of these people kind of give up early, or go do something else, even though they were happy where they were, or they give up even in their marriages or things. So there's this notion of like there has to be something. They're afraid of something. And I think the people that I found to age really well, to finish life with, you know, almost a kick in the steps, they learn that the real competitiveness is against your version of yesterday. You know, how are you a little better today than you were yesterday? And if in your mind, everything you do is about a little better than yesterday, you find that you can be incredibly juiced by that statement. And if you compete against yourself and you learn to compete against your version of yesterday, you're not going to win every day, But over time, you're going to surprise yourself on how much growth you're going to get. So that's a philosophy that I've developed over time that I find useful, because there are times that I want to kick someone's ass. I'm like, do I really want to go there? It's in our natures, but I think it's something to think about.
Great. Thanks, Rick. Rick, if it's okay, I'm going to move on to the question around Forward 787 and kind of building the skills of an island nation. So you personally have become very invested in developing leadership skills and the kind of technical and business skills of people from Puerto Rico. You bring them over, and you have been bringing them over to Red Ventures to kind of build their skills there. But it has a very explicit intention of then sending people back and kind of rebuilding the kind of broader Puerto Rico economy. I suppose one, I'd be interested in kind of two angles on it. One is just the skills that you're hoping to develop, and like I saw parallels in the work of WIP around like trying to influence and shape, in our case, Northern Ireland and Ireland through young people and through investing in people that we hope would have an influence. And I think it's always on our mind is how do we make sure that they're going back into an environment that's supportive of them. So how can we make sure that we give people skills and opportunity and a new perspective, and then we bring them into an environment where we hope that those views and perspectives and ambitions can thrive. So I suppose on the one side of maybe just your experience so far on the Forward 787 journey and how you think that's going, and then if you've any kind of thoughts about how you're trying to make sure that when they go back to Puerto Rico, they're in an environment where they can succeed.
What I've learned by following kind of my instincts and my heart around the social impact work we've done it's without getting too philosophical, is I've kind of figured out the true purpose in life. And the true purpose in life to me is to figure out a way to bring others along, to help others along. That to me is what feels complete. When I think about the moments when I feel like, okay, this makes a lot of sense, is when it happened through others, not to me. And it can be, through your friends, but more importantly for people that probably don't have the same opportunity. And that to me is like, I think your life has meaning when you're able to do that. So personally, I am attracted to things that kind of are in my wheelhouse. I don't believe that there's anything wrong with donating money or being a volunteer, but the true impact we can have is bringing our whole platform to something. So everything we've done has been with the purpose of like, can we bring enough density and enough resources to give this a chance to really get momentum? Because having done a lot of startups, that's hard. It's hard to do. So, that's a philosophical answer to your question. More specifically to Forward. So I was born and raised on the island. I love my island. I always thought maybe later in life I would go back. And then when I was coming back from trying to help during the hurricane, I had this guilt inside of me saying, you're a bit of a hypocrite. You could be doing a lot more now. And yeah, we brought all sorts of relief, but it was like giving somebody with cancer some Tylenol. Like it was irrelevant, right? And I was flying by myself, and I said, what, maybe it is time. And I said, I'm gonna try to get educated and start really exploring what we could do. And what I realized in Puerto Rico is that there are no apprenticeship platforms. The first industry that needs to be privatized is the private sector. And the two big companies there only work for the government, and yet therefore about 1,000 students go to study in the U.S. You're an American citizen if you're born there, and very few come back. So there's been a massive brain drain. Not only had the population gone down from 4 million to 3.1 million over 15 years because Puerto Rico's been in financial crisis that long, but all of the people that were getting well prepared were not coming back. So a lot of this became, how do we create, a beacon of energy and people that are from Puerto Rico are super passionate. It's like Ireland. You like island people, like you have this kind of passionate feel for your island. how do we marshal that, or how to harness that into bringing them back? And so we put an ad in the paper saying, hey, we're going to do this. And, you know, it was a crazy idea. I flew down, I did a bunch of talks, and then we had 35 people join us, and they were here for 15 months. They're down in Puerto Rico now. We committed some real resources. We moved some businesses. We found a phenomenal leader now. But it's a 30-year journey. Like, we're in year 2. Like, this is like, imagine trying to judge your life from when you were 2 years old. And, you know, a lot of what I have is a lot of young people like you guys that are super, super capable, wanting to sprint before they learn how to walk. Right? So, you know, every great building gets built down, not up. And so I spent a lot of time reminding them that, you know, if they really want to do something different, something lasting, something unique, to build a culture that, you know, really carries them through the highs and lows of what it is to be a company, they need to spend the time in the formation phases. So it's been really fun. We're by this fall, we'll have 80 Puerto Ricans back trained, and we're training them in all aspects of technology and digital marketing. And there's no technology in Puerto Rico. We probably now have, I don't know, 25 engineers out of that group, 30 engineers, and I'll assume we may have half of the good engineers on the island already. And it's like, you know, so what you hope is you can compound that. And, you know, if someday we have 300, 500, 1,000, we have a bunch of, and the big aha idea came when we said, well, why will we not serve, why are we thinking of serving Puerto Rico or Mexico or other Latin American companies? And I saw a chart that completely made sense to me. The economy of Mexico, the second largest economy out of Brazil, after Brazil, it's the size of the economy of Florida. So why would you focus on Florida as a market if you have, as a Puerto Rican company, complete access to the US? And in a digital world, you can do that, you know, even more so, right? So that was the big aha. So we saw the market size in technology and digital as massive. And now the bad news is we're competing against the most competitive market, which is, you know, US competitors. So now we got to rise up to that challenge, and that will take time.
Yeah. Well, Rick, I think the line there, it again, it may be a line that I think about of WIP, of that kind of 2 years into a 30-year journey. I talk, a line I like to use about WIP is trying to be aimed to have radical patience, to kind of try and like keep an eye on the horizon. So that sounds.
I like that.
Yeah. So I'm conscious for your time. I do want to respect it. So I'm going to ask, maybe we'll ask one last question, and I'm going to put it to Philip O'Callaghan, one of our alums, who's going to ask it. So Philip, would you mind just doing a quick introduction to yourself and asking the question for Rick? And then, like I said, Rick, my aim is to make sure we end you on time.
Thanks, Brian. Well, firstly, it's a pleasure to be on the call. My name is Philip O'Callaghan, a WIP alum of 2012. And every time I come on a call with WIP, I am enthused and I have a lot of hope, because each time these guys and girls are just incredible people. My current role is as an advisor to the Deputy Prime Minister, who was the Prime Minister on Friday, but slight change in government, so onwards we go. I'm struck, I suppose, from where I'm coming from, and you mentioned earlier on, Rick, about taking things for granted, whether that's a hug, whether that's meeting up with friends, and that lack of perhaps connection leaves scars in our society. So I'm interested to see what you're thinking or how you're feeling about some of the societal or economic impacts of what we've gone through in the last few months, and what, as leaders, we perhaps need to address next, because as leaders we have to make decisions and choices. So what societal or economic implications should we be trying to address?
So Philip, the honest answer is I have no idea. Well, I can give you some thoughts around it, but you know, I've never been through it. I do believe that we as human beings tend to take today's reality, project it indefinitely into the future, and then try to make decisions around that. There's been a lot of really difficult times in our history. None like this, but you know, there's been wars, there've been, you know, lots of really bad things. I mean, the Spanish flu 100 years ago was no different. There was just less communication, less technology, and wiped out millions of people. Like, so I think we tend to, in one hand, imagine, oh my goodness, the world is forever bad, and it won't be. Human beings are super resilient, and we'll come out of this. And it may be in a year that we're kind of reminiscing about, the Zoom days kind of thing, or it may be longer. You don't know, but it will happen, and this will change, and things will feel back to normal. And you need to know that. Now, that's the good news. The bad news is, unless we have intent and purpose, we're going to go back exactly to where we were when we came into this. And it starts with you as an individual. How are you going to get better? What have you learned about yourself? What have you learned about, time alone, time thinking, time, what are you going to appreciate to the other point? What are, where you want to start spending more energy or less energy on? What habits do you want to break? What habits do you want to form? What about this is going to be something that you're going to look back and saying, you know what, it was a turning point in my life. I've been thinking about themes for this silly Sunday letters that I write, and one of them will be, I don't believe in necessarily things happen for a reason. Not that they may, but I believe that we find the reason in the things that happen. And in that meaning, you own the opportunity to define this time period as something that really made you as an individual, you as a group, you as a country better because of it. And I think, hope is what drives everything in society. And it is fueled by our individual hopes and then our collective hope. So I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful now. History is not our friend. At least in the U.S., we've had something that felt just like this 60 years ago. Some people think that this is different, and I hope it is. And I'm going to do what I can to make sure that my sphere is not forgotten. But that's the true test of, like, was it worth it, or was it a wasted crisis? It's a shame to waste a crisis.
Well, Rick, I think that's a lovely note to end, in that there's opportunity and responsibility in crisis, and that we have the kind of power to shape our future. There's things we don't know, and there's things we can't control, but there are certainly, with your language there of having intent and purpose, at least we can try and shape some of the future as we look to it. So, like I said, we started with making sure that time is our most precious commodity. So I've asked for an hour, so I want to keep it to that. So we really appreciate your time. Adrian, thanks so much for arranging and organizing this. It's been a special event and discussion. Rick, pleasure, and we hope we'll welcome you at some point on the island of Ireland at some point in the near future. Adrian has a place, I'm sure, that he can that he will offer.
I hope he invites me one day.
Yeah,
I was with Rick in Ireland in 1994 when he was a very young boy.
Okay, well, Rick, the invitation, all of those warrants are now kind of, it's out of the jurisdiction, or like out of they're timed out now. So you're welcome back, and we look forward to welcoming you at some point on the island in the near future. And thanks again for your time.
Thank you. Very nice to meet you all. Go conquer the world. Take care.
Thanks, Rick.
Thanks.
Thank
you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, folks, thanks so much for that. Really appreciate it. I hope you found use in it. I know, like I'll stop